I started going to Area 51 in 1996. A friend of mine and I had been interested in UFOs. I'd been researching UFOs since 1977. And he and I, in 96, approximately 1996, decided that we wanted to go see if there was anything to the rumors of Area 51. And we wanted to see for ourselves what was happening there, if anything at all. And when we got out there to the location, we discovered there was absolutely nothing. We were confronted by a stretch of highway, one of the straightest, longest stretches of highway in the United States, by the way. We didn't know that at the time. Subsequent research showed that. But when we entered this valley, where we expected to find gates and fences, we found absolutely nothing but desert. And it took us almost a day to discover that we weren't quite as far into things as we could have been. And that's when we discovered Groom Lake Road, which is an 11-mile approach to Area 51. And it's a very, very straight gravel road. And it's 11 miles from the highway, Highway 375. So we were driving down the gravel road looking to find what we might find. And when we approached the mountains, there's a very low mountain range there. And as we approached, the first thing we noticed was off to the right of the road, up on a rise, there was a white Jeep vehicle sitting up there. And we continued down the road, and at the foot of this rise, the road came out and met the road we were on. And we very cautiously continued past that point. And the mountain range comes down on this side, and then a bit further to the south it comes down. So you've got something like this, and the road is forced to make an S maneuver. And when we came around the first corner right there, there was a very large set of signs, the typical Area 51 signs, you know, absolutely no photography allowed, no entrance, use of deadly force authorized, all of that stuff. Well, we saw the sign, and the first thing we did is we stopped and photographed it because it said not to. We weren't very smart. Then we very cautiously went around the first bend in the road and saw absolutely nothing. And at that point we thought, well, perhaps this road actually goes for quite a ways before we're going to get to the boundary line. So we continued on into the second bend of the S, and as we came around the corner, we saw a Hollywood typical phone booth sized guard post. And that was all, just a box, a wooden box that a man could stand in with stripes on it.
So you went in.
We didn't pass that. We just came up to it, and there was a big sign that said, "Stop."
Yeah.
And we did. We stopped our vehicle. Now, we were in a small pickup truck, and the windows were down. And we pulled up to this sign. We saw no one. All we saw was this little shack. We pulled up, and suddenly, as soon as we stopped, we heard voices screaming obscenities. They started beating on, I don't know where they came from. It's like they just popped up from nowhere, started pounding on the side of the truck, screaming at us, reaching through the windows. They reached through and grabbed my collar across my neck and tried to pull me through the window. I looked over at my partner who had been driving, and someone had reached in and pinned his throat and holding him back against the seat with one hand and was holding his arms with the other. And they finally opened the door and drug him out. They kept trying to pull me out through the window. I'm a big guy, and it was a small truck. So trying to pull me out of the window wasn't working. And they finally opened the door and drug me out, threw us on the ground. And the first thing that, and this part I surmise that they either stomped on my back or dropped a knee to my back. Some great weight hit me. I was laying on my face in the dirt. Some weight hit me in the back, knocked the air out of me, and then they grabbed my arms and my legs and pulled them up behind me and zip-tied my wrists behind me, my ankles, and then they zip-tied my wrists to my ankles so that I was held up off the ground. All the time they're screaming and yelling obscenities. You know, we could kill you. You know, are you stupid? Can't you read? Just constantly screaming various demands and phrases and expletives at us. I believe the idea was to psychologically disrupt us so that it was easier to overpower us, and it worked. They had us laying face down in the dirt, and then I was suddenly aware that someone was hitting me in the head, and I just kept feeling this, and they're screaming at me. I'm not even hearing what they're saying at this point. It's just, I'm so overwhelmed. But I could look past the front of our truck and I could see my friend lying in the dirt looking at me, and his eyes were huge and just full of terror. And I realized that they were doing the same to him. It was the muzzle of a rifle. They were hitting him in the side of his head, and I'm assuming they were doing the same to me. And I looked at my friend, and all I could think was, my God, my friend, I've killed you, because it was my idea to go there. And I was at that point pretty sure that we were likely to die. But they did this for about 5 minutes, just screaming and hitting us and kicking dirt in our face, and then suddenly they were gone. Just as quickly as they'd been there, they were gone. And I was trying to look around, but I had limited vision, trying to look around, straining to hear nothing for about 5 minutes. Suddenly they were back on us again, screaming again, kicking dirt in our faces, kicking us in the side, hitting us with a gun, and again screaming that they could shoot us, they could kill us, and no one would ever know what happened to us. Well, after a few minutes, that stopped again, and they didn't just disappear. We could tell they were still walking around. We could hear them talking amongst themselves about us. And they were talking things like, you know, should we call the base? Should we take them to our location? I don't know what that meant. Or should we call the police? And finally, someone apparently decided to call the local police, which, unfortunately, this part of Nevada is adjacent to Lincoln County, and the seat of Lincoln County is quite a distance away. But that's what they decided to do, apparently, was to call the Lincoln County Sheriff. So we're lying there, and it was probably about 105 degrees, and we're lying face down in the desert, trying to lift your head up, but then your neck gets tired, so you rest your face and you're in the dirt and in the sand, and then they'll come over and they'll kick more sand in your face occasionally just because they can. And we laid there for probably about 45 minutes or more, and then finally a truck arrived, and it was a small pickup truck similar to ours but white, with a camper shell on the back. And it was the Lincoln County deputy. And he got out, and the guards opened the tailgate of the truck, and they just picked us up like luggage and threw us up into the back of the truck on our faces, and pushed us up in there, closed the tailgate, closed the hatch. So now what had been about 105 degrees very quickly became more like 125 degrees inside this truck in the sun, in the desert. And after some conversation between the guards and the police officer, he began driving us out of the area, the same direction we had come, across 11 miles of very bumpy gravel roads. So we're bouncing, and our faces are hitting the floor of this, the metal bed of this pickup truck. And then you try to hold your head up so you don't hit your face, and now it's your chin being slammed into the floor. It's very hot, sweat running into our eyes. And he drove us the 11 miles back out to the highway. And he finally stopped, opened the back of the truck, cut the zip ties off of us, and let us sit up on the tailgate. And we were both very bloody in our face from hitting the bottom of the truck. He gave us some paper towels and some water and had us wash our face. And then he gave us cold water to drink. And he let us get in the cab of the truck with him. And then he continued driving us to wherever he was going to take us. So he drove us out of the valley. To get to Area 51, you have to come down a mountain into the valley. And the only thing in the valley other than Area 51 to the north, well, actually that's in another valley, but that's how you get to it. And the only thing in those valleys, there's actually two adjacent valleys, is a small town of Rachel, Nevada, which at that time was even smaller than it is today. and they had no constabulary there at all. So he drove us up over the mountain, and about another 45-minute drive from where Groom Lake Road, the dirt road, meets the highway, about another 45 minutes over the mountains and to a small town. And he took us there, and when we pulled into the parking lot at a gas station, convenience store kind of location, we saw our vehicle sitting there in the parking lot. So someone had left ahead of us and delivered our truck there. And the officer asked us, he said, do you gentlemen know what you did wrong? And we said, yes. He said, do you know why you were treated the way you were? And we said, no. And he said, you were treated that way because you had trespassed on federal property. He said, that's a military installation. He said, you knew that. And I said, yes, we knew it was a military installation, but we did not know where the boundaries were. We said, there was no fence, no gate. And he said, but you can read. He said, the signs said, do not cross this point, and you did. He said, that's why you were beaten, that's why you were detained, and that's why you were turned over to me. He said, do you understand that that was foolish, that you should not do that? And we said, yes, we understand that now. We now know where the boundary is. And I told him that. I said, we now know where the boundary is. And he said, no, you don't. He said, you do not know where the boundary is. He said, because the boundary actually started out a ways before you got to that sign. He said, where the military is concerned, he said, always allow them about an extra quarter mile beyond where you think you can go. He said, because they don't let you know in advance that you've already overstepped your bounds. So he told us, he said, I'm going to give you a few moments. He said, go into the store, get some beverages if you need to. He said, I can't make you do anything. He said, I'm not going to arrest you this time. He said, I can't make you do anything, but I highly recommend you get in your vehicle and go back to Colorado where you belong. Leave the state of Nevada. And then he left. And of course, we did not go home. After taking that kind of abuse, we knew there was something going on there, and we were determined to find out as much as we could. And in fact, what had been planned for a 3-day trip, one time to just look around, started an obsession with us that would continue for many years.